We would like to welcome you all to the Community Violence Intervention Addressing Gangs, Operating a Multidisciplinary Gang Intervention Team webinar. As a reminder, this webinar is being brought to you by the National Gang Center, which is supported by the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention. The National Gang Center exists to help communities implement comprehensive solutions to prevent gang violence and reduce gang involvement and suppress gang-related crime. For more information about the Gang Center, we recommend visiting our website at nationalgangcenter.ojp.gov. I will now turn it over to our moderator and presenter for today, Dr. Celeste Vojdalevich, a senior research associate from the National Gang Center, who will begin our webinar. Thank you, Celeste.
Thank you, Sterling, and thank you to all of you for joining us here today. Before I dive into the presentation on our intervention team, I'd like to share a few sobering statistics on the impact of community violence on youth. So as you can see, homicide is the third leading cause of death for young people aged 10 to 24. Each day, about 13 young people are victims of homicide, and about 1,100 are treated in emergency departments for non-fatal assault related injuries, and 900%. So if we look at this, 900%, being in a social network of a homicide victim increases individuals' homicide risk by 900%. So we know that thousands of people across the country experience youth violence. Youth violence may take various forms. They could be physical fights, bullying, and group inflicted violence. And the extent of violence may vary by demographics. However, the negative impacts that affect youth in urban, rural, and tribal communities is very severe. But the good news is there are many efforts underway to combat youth violence and make a positive impact. We hope the information that we present to you today will support you in your efforts to reduce youth violence and make your communities a better and safer place for youth and families. So I want to begin by sharing the objectives of the webinar today. The information that I'm presenting will be on the intervention team, and it is largely based within the framework of the comprehensive gang model, which was developed by Dr. Irving Spergel of the University of Chicago School of Social Work, and he developed the Little Village Project, and then that spawned off into the comprehensive gang model, which was implemented in multiple cities across the nation. And I'm sharing this just to give you the context of the intervention team. It may look very different for different communities, but I want to just give you really briefly some key facts about this model so you have an understanding as I go through the slides. So this is the gang violence reduction model incorporates prevention, intervention, and suppression approaches. And it's not a prescribed program, but it's adaptable framework that can be molded to fit the needs of the community. It is also designed for areas with serious violent gang problems involving primarily adolescents and young adults. And it asks participating agencies to collaborate, enabling them to go beyond traditional roles. And I think this will be applicable to any intervention team that you may find that you develop or that you are developing currently to actually go beyond the current role that you may have. And it's been this model has been evaluated and tested across the United States. So during the presentation, we're going to explain the roles and the responsibility of the intervention team. We're going to discuss the challenges associated with building the intervention team. And we're also going to identify strategies for engaging and effectively working with the intervention team. So to begin with, we're going to do a brief poll. When we start this poll, you don't need to enter your responses into the chat box, but we want you to respond to the associated poll. So I'm going to read this. It's a real life scenario, and I'm going to read it to you right now. So it's a 17-year-old male client is identified in a police file as a member of a West Side street mob. The client was recently questioned by the police department, having witnessed the fatal shooting of his best friend at a party. Evidence from the crime scene indicates that the shooting was gang related. So what piece of information would you withhold or not share with the intervention team? And keep in mind that this intervention team is going to be comprised of individuals, professionals from different agencies, so different fields. So the choices you have are A, the client may seek retaliation as in it is in possession of a sawed-off shotgun, according to law enforcement. The client has a girlfriend who is pregnant with his child, according to information gathered by street outreach. C, the client has been involved with protective services and foster care for several years and is currently on protective services, according to a social services mental health provider. And then D, the client was released 7 months ago from a juvenile justice residential facility with 4 months of post-supervision probation. Okay, we're going to end the poll in about 10 seconds. See a lot of responses coming in. Okay. All right. I think we can go ahead and end the poll. So we see it really varies, the results here. It seemed that a lot of people would share the information about the girlfriend who's pregnant. And the client may seek retaliation in his possession of a sawed-off shotgun. We don't see that. That would be more difficult to share. And then the client was released 7 months ago from juvenile justice residential setting. That one also was the least likely that someone would share that information. So we'll have more of a discussion about this later, but sharing of information is really key and to the intervention team. And we'll get into that discussion a little bit later as we have our panel discussion as well. So let's talk a bit about the purpose of the team-based gang intervention program. So as we know, people across the United States, across the nation are really looking for alternatives to arresting our way out of it. We know that a multidisciplinary team approach can really bring benefit to bringing intervention to the youth and providing increasing community safety. So the need for a team-based approach, at the core of a team-based intervention are these key issues. Each high-risk youth gang-affiliated individual is unique. Each high-risk youth gang-affiliated individual affects and is affected by their family, neighborhood, school, and peers. At the core, we understand that these key features are supported by the research and they're central to the work of the team. And research also suggests that there's only a relatively small number of gang-affiliated youth who are responsible for gang-related crime and violence in the community. Therefore, this core group may become the central focus of the team efforts. And here we're talking about if they're gang-affiliated or high-risk youth for gang violence in the community. And we can talk, and we'll talk a bit more about, even if you don't have a gang-related issue, how this program or these types of intervention team approaches can be used in your communities. So the need for a team-based approach As I mentioned, it's for high-risk youth, gang-affiliated individuals, and they often have multi-agency involvement. So what do we know about youth that have multi-agency involvement? We can say that for the most part, most of their experiences are not good when they're involved in with having multiple agencies involved in everyday activities. So we have child protection agencies, law enforcement agencies, juvenile adult courts, social service agencies, and schools. And this is just to name a few. Depending on your intervention team, depending on your community, the breakup or the composition of this intervention team may look very different. However, we do understand that these would be important agencies that would be involved with the high-risk youth or youth who have experienced trauma, who are gang affiliated. So high-risk youth, gang affiliated individuals frequently experience barriers to needed services. Therefore, it's important to have all these individuals at the table because there is going to be a lot of sharing of information. There's going to be a lot of discussion about the individuals that are involved in your initiative. And as a team, you can really break down some of those barriers and have a really rich discussion about strategies to overcome those barriers. So let me give you an example of a data-driven screening criteria. So one of the things that we know we have to have is a way for you to enroll youth into your initiative, into your program, and you need to have a focus on who you're actually going to be serving. So within the comprehensive gang model, you would have a comprehensive assessment, gang assessment of your community, understanding where the gang activity is occurring or the violent crime is occurring, and who is it affecting and who is driving the violence. So that is key. If you don't have an assessment, what we all understand is most of you in the community, in your line of work, you understand, have a good sense of where the violence is occurring. An assessment will help you to validate that. And it's very useful for really having a focused intervention. So this is just an example of a screening tool or enrollment, a referral, if you will, just with some information. I don't know if you can all see it, but it just asks for basic information. It asks for, there's a please check the box for an example, gang affiliated, if it's generational gang family, and then gang association. So is the youth involved in significant activity, and then the current level of supervision. And this will give you an opportunity to determine who all is involved, and therefore will also give you an idea of who all needs to be at the table. And what you'll find is that with these team-based approaches, you will not be serving you may have on your caseload a number of youth. Some programs may have 100 youth on their caseload, but there will only probably be a small percentage of those that are really driving the violence, and some of those will be more a high risk, and you may be involved in more prevention activities. Next slide. So the goal of the team-based intervention is really to look at short-term and long-term goals, right? So you'd identify, which I mentioned, the appropriate clients based on the local data and screening criteria. And this really helps you to have a focus on and concentrated effort on the youth that are driving the violence, as I said, or the youth that are being affected by the violence, high-risk youth. You're going to be creating an individualized case management plan for each client. And that's the beauty of an intervention team, because you can bring in all the agencies that have information. They're actually on the ground. They're the ones that have the most contact with the individuals and a good understanding of the clients that they're serving. And then you're going to engage the gang-affiliated youth individual in direct services. And I'll talk about this a little bit more, and as we go into the panel discussion, we'll discuss this as well. But individual services may involve, they may involve the social services, they may involve mental health, but they also would probably involve outreach or some type of street outreach who is directly involved with them. And their probation oftentimes is also very involved with the youth in identifying services or programs that meet their needs. And then you'll also look at dismantling or surmounting barriers to crucial services. We understand that where youth live and the difficulties they may have, the challenges they may have as a result of their involvement or their affiliation with a gang may prove difficult for them to get services. There also may be difficulty with services in the community in providing services that meet the needs of the youth or have the competencies to address some of the issues that are affecting gang-affiliated youth. So as far as a long-term goal, you want to build an ongoing relationship with each client. Outreach, as I mentioned, is a crucial service. I would say it's at the core of the service that is provided to gang-involved or gang-affiliated youth, I should say. So we want to assist the gang-affiliated youth individuals in transitioning safely out of a gang lifestyle. And we know that that would probably be the most difficult task when we talk about transitioning out of a gang lifestyle. So I think the goal here is to help the individual get involved in more pro-social activities and minimize the amount of time that the youth is spending with the gang. So therefore they may still have that involvement, but it's not to the extent that they had, and they're no longer behaving in the way that they were previously or involved in violent activity. And then improve the effectiveness of agencies serving gang affiliated youth. So I think the team approach also helps youth or helps agencies identify where they could help youth differently and where they can create more efficiencies within their systems. And then overall, I think the overall goal for everyone involved is to reduce overall gang-related crime in the communities and create a safer community for everyone. So it's intervention and also helping create more safer communities for everyone as a result. Next slide. So establishing an intervention team. So typically, although I haven't really talked about the steering committee, but typically for the comprehensive gang model, and this may be true of some of the other agencies or some of the other initiatives out there, that you would have an advisory board or some type of coordinating council, and they would help to identify some of the on-the-ground people, meaning the staff that have direct contact with these high-risk or gang-affiliated youth. So they may direct people from their staff to participate on these teams. For example, a director of probation may assign someone who is working with the caseload that involves gang-affiliated youth. Someone from law enforcement may like the chief of police may assign someone from the gang unit to participate on this intervention team. So the selection and training of team members is really key. You want to select people that have knowledge of the youth that you're serving. They want to have a passion, I think would be the right word really to say about them, this population or the population that you decide to serve. I'm just going to clarify, I'm speaking about gang affiliated youth, but I think this goes for any type of intervention team. With whether you're dealing with high risk youth, you have to have a passion for the population that you're serving and a good understanding of that, of this population. And then within the intervention team, you want to have goals, set goals, common goals, protocols and procedures to guide the team. So oftentimes the teams will develop their own protocol, and then it may be some policies and procedures that they all abide by. I think it's important that everyone respects and understands the roles and the capacity of each individual on the team, and what they're capable of doing and what they may not be capable of doing within their agency or as part of their role. So having those conversations up front are very important for the team to be effective. Then, as I mentioned earlier, the referral criteria and screening and assessment process. And that again is going to be based on your assessment. So you may decide that you're serving males between the ages of 15 and 24 in a certain area, because that's where your assessment shows that there is a need for services, or intervention services, I should say. And then identification of resources and services. So within that team, each person discussing about what the services that they offer and where they can find additional resources is very helpful for this, for the intervention of the youth and the families. And then information sharing protocol among team members. And this is critical. We did that brief poll in the beginning, and the information sharing protocols, I would say, is really one of the key factors that you have to look at for any intervention team. What you're able to share, how you share the information, how it's kept confidential, and what's the purpose of sharing the information. And we always say with the intervention team, it is important to share the information for intervention purposes. But we also want to say that we keep in mind public safety as well. So we want to make sure that people on the team are aware of risk and anything associated with delivering services to the youth and the families in the communities. So the structure of the team, it varies, but this is again within the comprehensive gang model. These are some of the players that you would have at the table. Adult probation and parole may be at the table. Street outreach workers are essential, law enforcement, mental health providers, school officials, job developers, family services, social services I mentioned, and you could have grassroots agencies. And the focus again is going to be on your target population, which is the high-risk youth or the gang affiliated youth, or a combination of both. Sometimes within the comprehensive gang model, you'll be focusing on high-risk youth and also gang affiliated youth. So meaning those that are actively engaged and contributing to the violence. But this can vary again based on your assessment and based on the population that you're going to be serving. So these are some of the key roles and responsibilities. So on your intervention team, you would have a coordinator, a project coordinator that would be the facilitator of those intervention teams. And this person would really be on the ground, really making sure that everyone that comes to that team meeting is prepared and ready to participate, and doing check-ins and making sure that everyone is has the information that is needed to provide information for intervention purposes. Then law enforcement, these are some of the areas they may, some of the issues they may discuss, some of the activity that's going on. It may be just crucial that they discuss some of the information that happened over the weekend, some safety issues for anyone working in the community to be aware of, and then some of the gang trends, and then also to support intervention goals for the youth. And probation can provide status, conditions of probation, and other court interventions. And they can also provide information on some of the services that may be provided through their organization or their connections to other organizations. And then schools also can provide educational status and performance, family background, attendance, and behavior. And usually, let me go through this. Usually these key agencies that I'm talking about, these aren't the only ones, but these are the main ones, I should say, that would be on the comprehensive gang model intervention team. So next slide, please. Social services, intervention needs and clients and resources to address them. Employment would be connections to employment training, preparing job partners, discussing who may be prepared for some type of internship or some type of training program. And then of course, street outreach. Street outreach would engage youth and assist them with adopting more pro-social behaviors, as I mentioned. These are street outreach workers are on the ground, they're in the community, and they're very familiar with the youth that they'll be working with. They're familiar with the community as well. And then they would talk also about the youth's progress, maybe some barriers to services, for example, and gang activities. It may be just like what's happening in the community, what are some of the trends in the community as well. And youth service providers would also be talking about provision of services and then feedback on progress. If, let's say, if a youth's enrolled in a program, how they're doing, or maybe you can develop some other types of services that may not be meeting the needs, that could be discussed as well. I think it's key, though, that all of the individuals that attend these meetings come prepared and share the information. Usually these meetings occur weekly. Some agencies have had meetings that just focus on what's happening in the community, like a separate meeting perhaps that involves these individuals, but just discussing safety issues. If there's a crisis occurring in the community, and there may be times when you have to meet more frequently, but on average, you meet for about an hour and a half, 2 hours a week. And one of the things about that is where you meet is going to be important too. You want to meet in some location that's comfortable for everyone, because you're going to be sharing information, and you also want to be really, sensitive to the information, sensitive about the information you're sharing. So again, this is the work that you do together to effectively support the gang affiliated youth. So next slide, please. So this is, I'll just briefly run through this. This is first steps with the client. So generally it would be someone from the team having the initial contact. In most cases, it's going to be the outreach worker, but that may not all, in most cases, but in some cases, it may be a probation officer having the initial contact, making that referral. And then there's a screening process. There's an intake process where the team decides if this youth is appropriate, if they meet the criteria. And then there would be a needs assessment, really looking at what are the individual needs of this person coming into the program. So you can strategize how to create this intervention team plan. So the first and foremost, we have to recognize that the youth, we want to make sure that the client's issues of safety are addressed. That's the key for everything, because if we can't ensure that, then it's going to be very difficult to serve the youth. So we have to make a plan for that, and then consider the client's current status, whether it's whether it's probation status, its educational needs, family living situation. Is the youth homeless? I mean, what are the priority needs for this youth that you're bringing into the program? And then you want to also consider the client's goals and desires. And I'd say that's first and foremost, really, because you won't be able to help them achieve what they want to if they're not brought into it and it's not something that they're invested in. And then you want to break down the plan into incremental steps towards achievable goals. So we want to make sure that each of these is doable, and that everyone on the team plays a role. Everyone takes some ownership of helping this youth and helping their families. So the next slide. So just kind of a recap. Pretty much here is it's a typical intervention team. You would review referrals in an intervention team. Again, this is going to either have you have an hour-long intervention team meeting, or lead into maybe a 2-hour intervention team meeting, depending on what's happening in the community and depending on what's happening with the clients that you're serving. So you may review referrals. You may look at the cases that you're working with. You may want to staff some of those cases and say, we're going to discuss maybe 4 of the 20 youth that are enrolled in the program at this meeting, because they come to the top of the list in terms of priority. You may want to discuss a crisis situation that occurred, during the weekend, over the week. Most times these intervention team meetings are scheduled in the early part of the week, and it's often because of we know that the weekend is a very busy time, and so it's fresh on everyone's mind what they may have responded to, and you want to come back and kind of regroup and see what kind of strategies you'll take, not only related to the youth that you're serving, but also within the community. So how are you going to address the crisis situation in the community and address maybe it's rumor control, trying to address some of the family's concerns, the youth's concerns as well. And then discuss, I mentioned the gang dynamics and any safety issues. So that may be a typical intervention team. And these are some of the things with all the youth that you will be serving, that there may be, as you discuss these cases, there may be times when the youth that you're serving is incarcerated, or he goes to placement, or he's detained. Those relationships will be maintained throughout. So whether they are in juvenile detention, or if they are coming out of a placement, the intervention team will keep in contact with them and will continue to provide services, as well as the team, not only the outreach workers, but the team itself will be apprised of the situation, will contribute to the discussion with any information they know that could help them to revisit the case plan or assist them when they're coming back into the community. And then you'll develop this, revised intervention team plan for anyone that is in need of it. And then again, you'll maintain contact with probation and parole officers as needed, and be very, very aware of the changing environments, because with things change and it's very dynamic. So the intervention team is well equipped to respond to any of the issues that come to the team. And then key to the effective team intervention team is building trust. And we talk about trust, but it's not something that comes easily, especially when you have different agencies involved and different ways of approaching gang activity in the community. So I think it can build over time, but it's really having respect for the partners that you're working with, being reliable, coming to the team prepared, managing your cases, and being knowledgeable about what's happening in the community. And then also just being very competent. And I think that goes without saying when people are very invested in working with this population, that they're going to really strive to do the best they can in delivering services and keeping the community safe. So, so for achieving and maintaining success in an intervention team, Trust is really important. As I said, it does take time. It takes a lot of conversation. Sometimes people don't always agree. Sometimes they disagree more than they agree. But it's just continuing to have that communication is really important. Breaking down barriers among the team is very important to gaining understanding about the purpose, which is to provide intervention services to the targeted population. And then aligning your purposes, seeing where you can join together, where you can be more powerful as a team, and meeting the purposes for all the agencies involved. And I think at the end of the day, if you look at it, a team approach is going to result in the goal for everyone, which is a reduction of gang violence, and then also helping the youth achieve his or her needs and promoting community safety. One of the things you have to look out for is turnover. We all know there can be high burnout. There may be people that are on the team that may not meet the needs of the team. They may not be up to speed, let's say, on working with this population. So there may be self-turnover, let's say, people that could self-select themselves out of the working on the intervention team, or it may be a request for this person's not working out, we really need someone else, meaning the project coordinator may have a discussion with somebody in another agency to request somebody replace the person on the team. And then, of course, we want to make sure that there's no domination by a single agency. This is a team approach. And while I know that might sound hard because there may be somebody, you may think that the coordinator may be the driving agency, but the coordinator's there to facilitate. They may come from the agency that received funding or is the primary agency, but their goal is to bring everyone together. And that's why it's really important to have a very accomplished, very skilled project coordinator. And we've seen that these types of intervention teams do very well with a very competent project coordinator. So I think the last thing I want to leave you with the intervention team is that no matter how big or how small, or whether you're funded or whether you're not, you see the resources. The comprehensive gang model intervention team was really designed for those areas with a high level of gang violence. But you can do this on a smaller level or a more scaled back level, whether you're in a school setting. I think a small intervention team that doesn't require a lot of money or doesn't require any money at all. But the key is to identify the population based on the risk factors, and then identify the commonalities and the goals that you're looking for on the team in terms of your purpose for meeting. So that's the presentation. Just kind of an overview, a brief overview of the intervention team within the comprehensive gang model. And now I have the pleasure of introducing our 4 panelists today. We have Monica Jacobson, the project coordinator of the Ignite Youth Alliance. And Monica is the project coordinator. She of the street outreach program administered by the Roundtable of St. Lucie County, Florida, in partnership with more than 30 other community partner agencies, providing services and opportunities for youth involved in or at high risk for being involved in gangs, high risk street activities, and community violence. She has held this position since 2015 and has been instrumental in building essential program components and managing day-to-day operations. We also have with us, and welcome Monica, and we also have Darcy McFoley. He is the outreach supervisor for the Ignite Youth Alliance. And Darcy currently serves as community outreach supervisor for the Ignite Youth Alliance. Mr. McFoley oversees all street outreach activities, including training of new staff, development of pro-social opportunities, and coordination of youth services and opportunities. Mr. Foley was the first street outreach worker hired for Ignite Youth Alliance. He quickly stood out as a leader among his peers and was soon promoted to lead outreach worker and finally to supervisor for the whole street outreach team. You're giving a lot of people hope out there, Darcy. So welcome, Darcy. And we also have the pleasure of having Carl Johnson. He is the Deputy Chief Probation Officer of Bexar County Juvenile Probation Department in San Antonio, Texas. Carl is the Deputy Chief Probation Officer of Field Probation and Court Services at the Bexar County Juvenile Probation Department in Texas. He has worked in probation for 35 years and served in supervisory roles for the last 17 years. He also serves as project director over the Probation's Department OJJDP funded initiative. And last but not least, we have Claudia McGuire, who is a program director and FTT supervisor for Vision Quest, also in San Antonio, Texas. So she is the family functional therapy supervisor for the CAPS program developed by Vision Quest National LLC, which provides comprehensive trauma-informed mental health services to Bexar County Juvenile Probation Department clients and their families via the Juntos courts and other specialty courts. And she has provided quality mental health services to youth in Texas for 10 years and is trained and is certified in a variety of clinical modalities and evidence-based practices. And hopefully I did justice to your bios and to presenting you. And I'd like to ask you to you can either add to that or if there's nothing else to add, then I would just ask Carl and Monica to tell us a little bit about your program. So if we could, Carl, if you could begin by just briefly telling us about your program.
Okay, thanks, Celeste. Good afternoon, everybody. Good to see you all. Our program is a component of the probation department, the juvenile probation department. So we have a little bit of leverage since all the kids in it are court ordered on probation, but we've got a very specialized target population. They're all either gang involved kids, gang members, documented gang members, or heavily gang affiliated. Maybe not claiming something, but we have documentation to show that they do spend a lot of their time with gang members. And all of these kids are quartered onto probation, then they end up in our gang unit, gang intensive supervision probation. They are required to see the kids at least 8 to 12 times a month in person, but they usually see them more than that. We try to keep the caseloads low so that they can devote more time to these kids. We try to put the focus on high-risk kids. That's something we do department-wide. All of our officers are trained in trauma-informed care. They're trained in motivational interviewing. We try to use evidence-based practices. Maybe about 10 years ago, we started putting a focus on relying on programs that are evidence-based or evidence-informed rather than the old way of doing it where you just kind of, found something and thought, well, maybe this works. We don't know. We'll try it. But we now, for the past decade, we've gone with evidence-based whenever we can. And that's pretty much the most of the programs we have in our department, this one included. Each of our kids receive a risk assessment. It gives them a risk and needs level. It focuses on criminogenic need. And a part of that risk assessment is an ACE score, adverse childhood experiences. It tells us about their trauma background. We use that to help inform how we're going to work with these kids. So our grant, we were awarded our grant in 2019. It's a 3-year grant. The target was 12 kids a year. We're right at that right now. We're at 28 kids served. So we're a little bit ahead. And I think we're going to, come right in at the right number here in the last year. So, but as I mentioned, all of those kids are court ordered on probation. They're in the gang unit. And that's where we have our task force And we have our specialty court, which is the Juntos, as Celeste mentioned. That's for where the judge meets with these kids every 2 weeks. We do most of it by Zoom during the pandemic, but prior to pandemic, and then we're starting to get a little bit more in person with the judge, but they see the kids, judge sees the kids face to face every 2 weeks, gets an update, gives encouragement, maybe gets on them a little bit, but we try to do what we can to encourage them to cooperate. So part of the programming for all these kids is they have the probation support, they have mentoring, they have job development, we provide referrals to educational services. We of course have the Vision Quest in-home counseling that Claudia McGuire's agency provides, which is essential because they're, a lot of these kids have obstacles that keep them from being able to get to counseling in other areas. So we go to the house, or Claudia's team goes to the house and does it. It's very effective. We have violence prevention, substance abuse counseling, and these services are available to the kids. Most of them hit and miss, right? Some like the service, some use some of the services, some aren't so keen on them, but we keep working with them. Even if they fail, we'll keep trying. We try to do a strength-based approach. We try to not criminalize normal kid behavior. They miss a few appointments, they're late for something, they don't do something, we don't put them in detention. We just try to keep working with them, realizing they have a lot of challenges. So we offer them incentives. We, gift cards, activities. We have a robust enrichment programming portion of our department. We could offer them ropes challenge. We have an equine therapy program that we can send the kids to if they're interested. Just a variety of community programs, sports, art, music, things like that. We found a few years ago that, one of the problems was a lot of these kids don't have any pro-social activities. Their pro-social activities are just hanging around with their buddies out causing trouble. To them, that's pro-social, right? So we've got these activities that we try to give, things that they would probably never be involved in otherwise or never even think about. And they may not even know they're interested in them until we get them interested, or try to get them interested anyway. So, I don't know if you want me to talk about our task force right now, Celeste, or just.
Yeah, we could probably get into that a little bit later.
Okay.
But but thank you for that, Carl. Yeah, we could definitely want to hear about your task force for sure. Monica, tell us a little bit about your program, please.
Good afternoon, everybody. So Ignite Youth Alliance is a comprehensive gang model site. And we have implemented all 5 core components of the comprehensive gang model since 2015. Our program is administered by one of those steering committees that Celeste was talking about earlier, and that's an organization called the Roundtable of St. Lucie County. They are a nonprofit organization that consists of agency leaders, business leaders, elected officials, law enforcement, probation, all with the objective of pulling together resources for comprehensive programming for youth and children in St. Lucie County, where we are located in Florida. We have, so Ignite Youth Alliance is basically the social intervention and opportunities provision piece of the comprehensive gang model. Our primary mode of service delivery is our street outreach program and our multi-agency intervention team. We currently have 8 outreach workers or 8 outreach staff, including Darcy, who is the supervisor of that. So we got 7 outreach workers. Each of them have a caseload of 15 to 20 youth each. We also have, and the role of the outreach workers, I'm going to actually let Darcy say a little bit about before I move on.
Okay, well, the role of the outreach worker is to connect with the youth, develop a trusting relationship, and to recruit individuals to the program, and also to allow the kids to do some pro-social opportunities, provide a positive role model in their life, and continue to encourage them, having those great one-on-one conversations to them.
Yeah.
Thanks, Darcy.
All right. So, and of course, the other piece of that is the multi-agency intervention team. And we operate our team very similar to how Celeste has described it. We work collaboratively to put together individualized service plans for these kids. We review them and we problem solve, we share information, collaborate on implementing various services. We serve about 130 youth per year, plus minus. Our core group of youth is probably between 12 and 18, but we also serve youth all the way down to 6 years old and up to 24. We serve high-risk youths. That's also our majority group of kids that we serve. Directly involved in driving gang violence in St. Lucie County. We decided on that because we did a gang assessment like she talked about as well. And that's what law enforcement data in particular said, that this is the group that we need to work with. But as we worked and we've been involved in the community, we see that there are a lot of kids that aren't necessarily documented, a lot of kids that are driving violence that law enforcement don't have any papers on, and that we need to engage them in these services. The services that we provide as a program includes, of course, mentoring. That's the biggest service. Outreach workers, mentoring is the biggest service that we provide. And outreach workers do everything under the sun, life skills, employment assistance. We do transportation. We also do pro-social activities. Engaging youth in pro-social activities, like Carl said, is incredibly important. So we pay athletic fees to engage them in organized sports. We take them to ropes courses. We do college tours, fishing trips, what have you, beach trips, engagement in community service activities. We help with probation requirements. So we work with probation, we know what they need to do, and we try to persuade them, okay, let's go and do certain things. But as opposed to Carl's program and Claudia's program, we are a voluntary program. So we don't have a judge or anybody else who can tell them what to do, solely on the basis of the relationship that they have developed with the outreach worker. So that is, the outreach worker is the most important piece of our engagement strategy. We also provide other evidence-based programming like anger management. We do fatherhood initiative. We're working on doing a girls circle program because we also serve girls now. We help with reentry when a kid comes out of juvenile commitment or jail. We already know like a month in advance, so we start prepping. We have another team that actually work with specifically with reentry. And like I said, it's voluntary and no cost to participants. So that's, I'm going to stop right there.
Okay, thank you, Monica. Thank you, Carl. Thank you, Darcy. Claudia, do you have anything to add about your program, about yours and Carl's program?
Well, I think we definitely provide a very trauma responsive type of service. We work with several evidence-based models that help us to ensure that we're able to address issues like anger management, substance abuse, along with some pretty significant trauma or mental health issues. We work in a team of several case managers, along with several FFT therapists, that also provide beyond family therapy, individual therapy as well. And those case managers help to get our foot in the door in terms of ensuring that we're able to successfully engage clients. They also help with assessments and so forth, and giving us that baseline information that's going to dictate treatment planning. So yeah, that's pretty much how we operate in our team as a whole.
Okay, thank you all for that. And I think that's a great overview, and it kind of shows two different programs, but yet you both programs use a team approach. So let's talk about that a bit. So what does the intervention team look like in your community? So Carl, would you like to take that question?
All right, sure. Well, as I mentioned, the probation department is part of it. The gang unit, which consists of 6 probation officers, they're involved. And then the task force meets once a month, and the members are probation. We've got Vision Quest, which is Claudia's organization. Law enforcement, San Antonio Police Department, they have a representative there. San Antonio Housing Authority, the Education Services Center, Region 20, which is another education support agency. We got San Antonio Violence Prevention, Alamo Area Workforce Solutions, and our in-house mentoring program. So those representatives are on the Zoom call every month. We share information. The probation officer at each meeting, each probation officer kind of gives an update about what's going on in their part of town as far as the gang activity and things like that. We never mention any names on the task force meeting or during the task force meeting. We specifically say that at the beginning, no names, no first names, no last names, to keep the anonymity. But so the probation officers give their status reports about the community. Then the partners all share whatever it is that's going on in their piece of the program. We do some information exchange. The gang intel that our guys provide is really helpful, especially for the school component, because obviously, there's a lot of gang related activity in school, and they're always glad to get that information. It comes in handy. The biggest part of our task force is the fact that we're all working towards the same goal, which seems to be, should always be the overriding number one priority of your group, right? But it isn't always the case, I guess. But yeah, we all have the same vision, the same goal of getting these kids through the system, the probation system, maybe empowering them and their families with a few tools they can use when they get out so that maybe they don't come back. We provide incentives for them. I mentioned that earlier. We'll provide, at Thanksgiving, we'll provide turkeys for some families that need it. Around the other holidays, we'll provide things if they're limited in what they can do. We can provide clothing if we need to, things like that. What we want to do is get the kids to understand that we're not, law enforcement isn't always against them. We're not always against them. It helps that we have law enforcement on this task force, because also law enforcement is at I mentioned our specialty court, and, law enforcement has some involvement in that, in our staffing. So the kids, hopefully understand that, the cops aren't always just there to get on them and arrest them. The cops can also be their ally in certain situations. They're there to help them. So biggest thing is just trying to build this relationship with the kid, get them to trust what, the system and what the man is doing to try to help them get through this deal. But my role is just kind of oversight of the probation component. To a lesser degree, obviously we can't control what the other agencies do, but we have some input on who joins, or if someone's going to leave, we talk about finding someone to replace them. So, but pretty much that's, I think that's a snapshot of our task force.
Sounds like they go beyond, outside of their traditional roles, so to speak. Would that be fair?
I think so. Yeah, they do. And they're always willing to look at different options. Everyone's got a voice, right? Everybody's got to say. Fortunately, we haven't had any conflicts or anything like that, but people may not always agree, but they're able to discuss it and come to a peaceful resolution without any, further problems or resentment or issues like that. So we have a good group. They've been together for the most part. We've had a few come and go, but for the most part, they've been together. And that's one of the challenges that we'll probably talk about a little bit later, is just team members leaving, and then they have to plug in somebody new that has to get up to speed. So.
Right. Thank you. And Claudia, do you want to add anything to what Carl mentioned?
Yeah, I think beyond just the therapeutic services that we provide, and just to clarify, our team consists of one case manager and another therapist along with myself. But we also really want to be there as advocates for both the family and for the youth, because, as you know, historically, this is a population that really hasn't had an opportunity to share their narrative in a very open and I guess, profound way, due to maybe just shame around the experiences that they've had in life, or maybe just threats of violence. But really what we try to do is create a safe space for them to share all of those experiences, to share their truth essentially, and then to help them create a life worth living.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. And Monica and Darcy.
All right, so our intervention team has at least, I think we have 13 different agencies represented. We have the traditional, outreach workers, we have schools, we have law enforcement, gang detectives we have 3 jurisdictions in the county. So we have gang detectives from 3 different jurisdictions that come to our meetings. We have mental health, and as opposed to the other team with 1 mental health, the way mental health is done here in Florida, and the way a lot of the kids receive services through probation, and we have probably 10 to 12 different mental health agencies that provide services to the youth. So it's hard for us to pick one. So what we do is that we invite the particular agency to the meeting that's relevant to the kids. So, but we have that. We have a particular organization that's specializing in trauma. So that's one. We have workforce agencies. We got substance abuse agencies. We have child protection agencies involved as well. Health department, nurses, school nurses, very important for the kids. And we also have DJJ reentry and day treatment program representatives, because our youth are involved in all of these systems. So we're not talking about 2 agencies, but they may be involved in like 5 or 6 different agencies where they are responsible for completing tasks. And that is overwhelming for the family and the youth. We do not have the youth at our meetings, but we work, and I forgot to say that earlier, we work with the whole family. So some of the services that we provide are things like rent and utility assistance, food assistance to the family to provide that stability. We meet every 2 to 3 weeks. And the way the sort of meeting goes down is that the team in collaboration selects 5 youth sort of prioritized on the roster of who needs to be reviewed, and we allow the others, because we don't always know everything that goes on with them in each agency. So we allow, hey, law enforcement, they've been seeing this kid breaking into cars now for several weeks, and we weren't necessarily involved in that. So they want to pick him or her. I want to say a little bit something about the level of the people that we engage in the team. I think it's important that you pick mid-level to high-level people because you have to be able to put together a plan and to make some decisions in the meeting, or you have to have some kind of power to utilize the resources of your agency. And we have specialists, like we got gang detectives, not just regular law enforcement, and we got trauma-informed specialists, or the way we do it is that we pick these youth at the end of each meeting. Each agency provides like a write-up to me before the next meeting with what's going on with them. I put it all together in a comprehensive summary that I share with the team. And based on knowing all the different pieces, I try to identify what are some of the biggest challenges, barriers to service, and what are some of the things that we need to problem solve or brainstorm together as a team in the meeting. Sometimes, actually most of the time, the outreach team will meet before the actual meeting, and we will review these summaries and pick out things like, how are we going to share this information to the team? Is there something in this summary here that we don't want to share with everybody? Or if we feel like we need to share it, how can we articulate it in the most sensitive way to the rest of the team so that it is to the benefit of the youth of the family and not just, yeah, he smoked weed, so the probation officer gonna come do. So we try to be sensitive on that. Our agenda always involves safety briefings from gang detectives, talking about what's going on in the community, where the violence is taking place. Outreach workers will also participate and provide some information as well about what they know. And this is very useful for the schools for, because things happen in school or often take it to the street and the other way around. So it allows for both service providers that do house calls. A lot of our service agencies do house calls. So knowing where violence is so that they can take proper safety precautions as well. So then we do the review, we discuss, and we come up with a shared intervention plan that sort of takes into account what they got to do for probation, what they got to do for reentry, what they have to do for school. And then we assign tasks. You are in charge of following up on the grades. You are in charge of engaging this youth in some fishing trips. You need to do the drug screening with them. And then I usually follow up and try to keep people accountable. I will review the task at our next meeting to make sure, it's been accomplished. But we do also a lot of work in between meetings. I will call people, make sure, are you going to come to the meeting? Here's some things to be aware of, where are you at on this?
So the role of the program coordinator is very important.
Yes, so I do a lot of stuff, but I would say the other really, really important piece is what outreach is doing with the rest of the agency. So outreach is not another agency. They provide the secret sort of sauce to why this is successful. So I want Darcy to talk a little bit about how it is that outreach is doing their job and making this successful.
Yeah, and if you would, Darcy, please just describe your role and the responsibilities you have on the team. That would be great.
Well, once again, good afternoon. Well, our major role is being an advocate for the youth. In order to be an advocate for the youth, we have to know what's going on with him or with her personally, within the family, within the school, and all the services that provided to the youth. So we have to build that relationship with the individual and try to know as much as possible so we can kind of advocate for what they need or what we see that could possibly help them and their family. And so basically that's our role in the intervention meeting, is to bring that information to the team, to let the team know what's really going on with this youth. Why this youth is missing appointments, why this youth is not going in this area. It's a whole bunch of things other services don't really know what's going on. And that's our role as outreach workers. Like, we know what's going on because we built that relationship. They trust us. They see that we have love and concern for them. And so whatever they need, they know we're going to try our best to provide that for the youth. So that's the outreach component in the intervention team, is to advocate the needs for the youth and their family.
Okay, thank you for sharing that, Darcy. Claudia, do you want to talk about your role and your responsibilities on that team when you go to the intervention team?
Say one of my major responsibilities is to make sure that I'm able to collaborate with the PO officers. I also make sure to staff any cases that they might think what be a good fit or fit criteria for participation in our program and services. Because we definitely want to be able to match a therapist to the family and the client well, and see if there's any potential barriers to their participation. Oftentimes there might be difficulty with transportation. So, in the situation with the pandemic, they might not be willing to see us at the office, and we might have to do some Zoom calls with them. So just getting all of that organized is essential. Also making sure that we take part in the monthly task force meetings, because it's very beneficial to our clients that we're able to collaborate closely with those community partners, because they might have resources that'll be essential to the success of our clients, and them meeting their treatment goals. So I would say that's pretty much what my role is in terms of the intervention team.
Yeah, very important roles that both you and Darcy and Monica described. And Carl,
Mhm.
what's your role on can you describe your role? And I know it's a role too.
Yeah, I mean, I'm part of the probation department, so I oversee the gang unit that is the, primary part of the task force, but also, I have some involvement in who ends up on the task force, or if someone leaves, we have to go see what we can do about getting a replacement. So, I mean, typical program coordinator, I guess I kind of got to make sure all parts of the program are running, that we're, meeting our goals, and that we're, addressing areas where things may not be working right, or finding ways to improve services.
Mhm.
Just basic, I mean, pretty standard program coordinator type things, right? So it's just a matter of trying to keep everybody on the same page, which isn't very hard because everybody's very well coordinated anyway. So it's not as complicated as it has been with some other programs. So it's it's a very efficient program, and that's through the work of the folks that are doing the work on a daily basis. So I don't have much to do with that. I just kind of sit back and watch it run like it's supposed to, which is great for me.
And I know it will vary. The amount of work, I suppose, depends on the type of program and whether it's voluntary or it varies across, I think, all the communities. So I think that's the important piece that both you and Monica have mentioned, that important piece of the program coordinator and how to get everyone engaged and finding the right people. I think you both have talked about that, finding the right people to serve on the committees is really, really important. So thank you. So what is the most important for the success of an intervention team? What would you say, Carl, what would you say would be the most important?
I mean, I think it probably applies to a lot of things. It's that everybody's got the same goal in mind, or everybody's pulling in the same direction. I mentioned earlier that, we try to give the kids skills so that when they leave the system, they have things they can use to help avoid getting into more trouble. We work with the children and their families. The in-home counseling that Claudia's agency provides works with the entire family. Regardless of, although maybe just what the one kid is on probation, when they're in the home, they address issues that are related to the whole family, I believe. So that's always beneficial. In the task force I mentioned earlier, it gives these kids understanding that these agencies aren't against them, they're supporting them and they're for them and they're there to help them. And I think that could be beneficial when they get a little older. And they realize that all these people that were involved with them really were trying to help them. So really though, I think it's just that everybody has a say-so, a voice, and everybody's working with the same goal in mind. So to me, those are the two most important things.
Thank you. Claudia, do you want to add what Carl said? Or what would you think is the most success?
Yeah. It's definitely the strength of the collaboration. And just to add what Carl said that I feel is very profound is the fact that we each have a voice and that each of our roles is respected. I've been on several other units where I don't feel like my expertise may be just as appreciated as it has been with the gang unit. So it's just really nice to see that, my role is respected and appreciated. And that has a direct impact on the people that we serve as well. So I'd say just the strength of the collaboration overall.
Thank you. Okay, Darcy, what about you? What do you feel is the most important for the success of the intervention team?
Teamwork,
Teamwork. Good
teamwork,
word.
teamwork. That's the most important success of the intervention team. When we case manage the youth and everybody hear the different scenarios of what's going on, and we be able to put it all together and come up with a nice case plan to help the youth, and it all is and be successful. So by everybody just being on the same page, listening to everybody's concerns and seeing what's the most priority, what's first, and what could come last, and getting together and going, let's get it done. Because the main objective is to better prepare services for this individual, to advocate, provide services for the youth and the family. So it's the teamwork.
That's great. And then Monica, and then Darcy, I want to come back to you, and I want you to share a success story if you could, if that's possible. Okay, so Monica, what is the most important for the success of the intervention team?
I kind of agree with everybody else has said. I think for us, consistency of membership. I don't know, you have the same people that come to the meeting over a period of time, so they already know what this is about. This is, like you said in the beginning, you represent an agency, but you also try to stretch your role beyond that agency. And we have kids that are not on probation sometimes. And so probation is still in the room, and probation is still invited to provide their input on what they think will be best for this kid. So that is important. I think another thing that I feel is critical is that members buy into the process, that they're not there because their boss told them to be there, but they're there because they actually think that this is a something that will help the youth and will benefit their agency. We often do presentations to agencies that have kind of heard about us, but don't really know what we do. And one of the benefits that we kind of provides to other agencies is that we provide access to clients. Many mental health and substance abuse programs in our area are unable to connect with gang involved youth because you can't, they're not answering the phone, they're moving, they're homelessness, they don't have phones. There's a lot of barriers in place. And we have that access because we're in the streets and we know, and we can provide that, and we can follow up with the agency. So we are able to improve outcomes for other agencies. And when they see that, they want to come. And I think lastly, and Darcy can definitely talk to this one, that's trust. Especially for the type of team that we have, because we have outreach and we have law enforcement. And as many of you know, effective street outreach workers are people that know the streets, oftentimes been in the streets and seen what's there. So we've had situations with outreach workers who know the law enforcement have been arrested by the team members in the room back in the day. And so I remember our first intervention team meeting. Darcy does have a history, and I know he can talk about them himself, but there was an officer in the room that he knew, and like he refused to literally show him his phone even. They did not want to talk to each other at all. But now 6 years later, we went on conferences together with law enforcement. We're friends, and we built that trust. The same for law enforcement. They, coming to a meeting and seeing, here's, I arrested it. What he doing here? For that law enforcement officer to see what that outreach workers is doing. And maybe Darcy share this story that Deputy Jaden always talks about with the laundry, when the light finally went on for this gang detective about outreach.
Yeah, that's quite true, Monica. Be effective outreach worker. And honestly, not to be effective outreach worker, but you have to be through some things in life. And I've been through a lot of things in my previous life. And so it was kind of hard with the trust issue with law enforcement, especially, you've been through the system from DJJ to jail to prison. bad encounters with law enforcement. So you kind of still plays in the back of your head. But once we got out into the streets and started, doing some things with the individual and law enforcement, see what was doing, they were like, okay, I see that. And also the things law enforcement was doing with us, giving us information about where not to go, where not to be at. Y'all, please don't go in this area, sharing the information with Monica so she can let us know, hey, y'all don't go over there, it's hot over there, or the same thing with us. If it's an area that we see is not right, we'll share with Monica, hey, Monica, hey, it's not cool over here. We see people with weapons, it's kind of hot, kind of tense. And Monica do the same thing. She'll share that information to the people she need to share it with. So we just started building that trust. And we had a gang conference in Denver, and we really hung out. And one of the officers was talking about this particular youth. Well, he wasn't talking about a particular youth. We was coming home from Lauderdale, was coming back to St. Lucie County, and I got a phone call. And the youth, he wanted to. He's talking about he didn't have nothing to wear for school and he want to, do this and that and that and that. So I say, check this out. Just get your stuff together. Once I get home, I'm coming to your house. I'm going to grab your laundry. I'm going to do your laundry so you can have something to wear to school. And he said, okay. So I hung up the phone. And so the officer said, you going to do his laundry? I'm like, yeah, I'm finna do his laundry because he said he has nothing to wear. So if I do his laundry, that means he's going to school. So that means from Monday through Friday, from this time, he's going to be accounted for because he's in school. If I don't do his laundry, he's going to be somewhere where you're going to be at. So for me doing his laundry, that gave him the opportunity to be in school, to be safe, have food. He could eat breakfast and lunch, and he could, worry about his education. Without that laundry, he's going to be out in the street ripping and roaming and doing what he's doing with his friends. And so he just sat back and he scratched his head. He scratched his head, but he didn't have no rebuttal at that moment. But a couple of weeks later, he said that an intervention mean like, by that conversation, how I was able to explain that and see the things that we do. Just simply doing his laundry. And I told him I was going to fold his clothes, I'm going to put them on hangers, and I'm going to deliver them back to his house like they came from the cleaners. And he was like, oh my gosh, you do that? I'm like, that's what we do as outreach workers. Whatever these kids need, we gonna do that. And when they see that and they get to feel love and comfort, then the things we want them to do and try to focus them to do, they'll take attention on and say, okay, yeah, I need to go to school. I need to do this. I'm going to do this. So that's one of our little success stories from our intervention team, one of our key players with law enforcement. They seen the bigger picture of what we bring to the team.
That's a great story. Thank you so much for sharing, Darcy. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. And it is something that's kind of takes some time, right, to build that relationship. It's not done overnight. I always wish we had more time with these panel discussions, with conversations. I know we're running up. We've got about maybe 7 minutes left, and I'll probably skip through. Do we have Sterling, let me ask you, do we have time for any questions from the audience?
Yes, Lex, we have a few minutes for additional questions from the audience, and we did receive quite a few on some different topics, so we can take those questions.
Okay. Let's see. So let me go through. Let's see. Let me see, maybe.
Plus, I've got a couple queued up if you'd like.
Yeah, why don't you go ahead and read them?
So one question, there was a couple questions about information sharing. And so, for example, for Chief Johnson, for example, how do you all collaborate to support different individuals if no names are used in those different task force meetings? That was one of the questions from our audience.
Well, the law enforcement, obviously, they know who a lot of these kids are anyway, but we don't use the names because a lot of the agencies are, private sector. Well, I guess there's school involved, so not private sector, but we just don't use the names for the anonymity. But we share information. The purpose of the task force is really to get whatever resources those agencies can provide for us. And then the gang unit officers, make sure those get to the kids. So really the task force is like a middleman, I guess you'd say. They're aware of the resources. They get us the resources so that we can make them available to the kids. There are going to be times when the kid's identity is known just because of their involvement with some of these other agencies, right? I mean, some of these kids are cross agency. A lot of agencies are familiar with a lot of these kids, but we just do that because occasionally on a task force meeting, we may have maybe someone just standing in for somebody else, or we may have a intern who's watching the task force meeting. So we just like to err on the side of caution, because with the juvenile, all of their information is confidential, really. So we have to be careful about how we do it. But I don't know if that answers the question.
Hopefully it does.
I hope so.
I think it does, yes.
And then this is a more general question for everyone. When it comes to a partner that maybe is difficult to engage, that you need on the team, or that doesn't seem to acknowledge the presence of gang activity in the team, how do you sort of overcome bringing those partners to the table? So for example, a state attorney or someone along those lines, that maybe they don't acknowledge the problem, but you need them at the table.
Well, I can say here in Bear, we have a district attorney. The district attorney's on board with our program as far as the specialty court, the gang specialty court. They're in the district attorney's in the staffings there. When we talk about possible outcomes for the kid, the attorney always has to look at it from their perspective, right? They represent the community, they represent the victim. So they have that to consider, but they also are willing to consider our side, that we're, maybe these kids, we might give them a chance or two more than some other kids might get, or they might have some extenuating circumstances that we might be able to give them one more chance rather than, remove them from the community. So the DA's on board for the most part. There's some times when there may not be total agreement, but everyone respects the role, because I think that's important to, know who's on your task force, know who's involved in your meetings, and know where they're coming from, because they all have a job to do. And sometimes that may be counter to what the task force is trying to do with these kids. But as long as everybody can talk about it and professionally deal with it, keep it in mind, and everybody's got their role, then I think it probably works out well.
And there's another question. I can see the questions now, Sterling, but thank you. So there is a question about if everyone works with families as well as youth. So is it for Bear? I know Fort Pierce and San Antonio, so Bear County also does work. And does your data show these efforts are effective? So the work that you're doing, is it effective in the data?
I'd like to take that. And actually, that was actually going to be my answer to the last question. When somebody doesn't believe there's a gang problem, show them the data, because that's what we do. We do collect data about the gang situation. We have done our gang assessments, and we, collaborate with law enforcement so that we have the data. And whatever law enforcement hasn't collected, we have outreach worker data, because they are in the streets. But as far as effectiveness, our program did a 4-year program evaluation with an external evaluator, and it showed that the violence in Fort Pierce, with all the different things that we have done, while the population in Florida and Fort Pierce and St. Lucie County had increased in that period, violence had gone down. I believe it had gone down with over 30%. And that's not to say that it was the intervention team that did that, but all the different things that the various partners are doing. You know, law enforcement are doing gang suppression on their own. You know, there's all kinds of different efforts, but all in all, violence had decreased at a much higher level than sort of on a national basis. So absolutely, but you have to collect data, you have to be very specific and plan ahead to document your efforts because, yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Monica. Well, I know we're come up to the 3:30. We do have other questions, but for those questions that we weren't able to get to during this webinar, we can address them, or NGC can address those later. So with that, I'd like to thank all our panelists today. Do you have any final comments some takeaways maybe that you'd like to share? If we could start, just real briefly, we are at 3:30, but like a, 30-second takeaway. So Claudia, do you mind if I start with you?
No, that's perfectly fine.
So
yeah, from hearing Monica and Darcy speak, I'd say that I got a better appreciation for really getting down in the trenches with these youth and really meeting them where they're at. And they do that in such a wonderful way. So I think despite the fact that we go into the homes and the pandemic changed that for us, I can't say that we meet them at that level per se, doing their laundry and all that really good stuff to see them be successful. So I just really appreciate people taking the time to do something so extraordinary.
Thank you, Claudia.
You're welcome.
Darcy?
I just want to say I appreciate being a part of the panel, and just one takeaway from this is that it takes a team to raise a community. It takes a village to raise a child. So it's not not just about what the outreach worker do. It's about every member of the intervention team. Everybody plays a part. Everybody has a goal, and once we bring it together, we can see some great things happen with these youth and their family. So it's just like the teamwork, from different parts, from the probation part, from outreach perspective, like Monica coordinating everything with the intervention team. It'd be like, I love the meetings. Meetings go great, especially when we come to these plans and these plans become successful.
Thank you, Darcy. Monica?
I think one thing that I take away is that, it's worth it. It is hard work to put together an intervention team. It is hard work to develop relationships, to get on the same page. But hearing that gang detectives are in charge of providing these services is very inspiring to me. I couldn't see that happening here. Maybe, I don't know. But I find that to be really, really interesting. I know there's a program in Palm Beach that does something similar. Police officers are kind of like outreach workers, and they don't have that. So, but I would just say to everybody who's listening, who is having a gang problem and wanting to do something, that putting together a team like this is absolutely worth it for the service of the youth. That's mine.
Thank you, Monica. Carl?
Well, here in Bexar County, we've come a long way. Back in the mid-90s, we were the drive-by capital of the Southwest. We've come a long way, and that's from the hard work from all the staff, the boots on the ground, as so to speak, people like Claudia, Darcy, Monica, the work they do in the streets and in the community. That's what hard work is done, the day-to-day. It's not glamorous. You grind away, and those are the folks that are doing it, right? The people at the top are just kind of overseeing it, but they're the ones doing all the work. And also, Celeste, I want to thank you and your group for all the support you give us. The resources, putting together these webinars and all that's very helpful, and we appreciate it.
Thank you. And thank you to all for the work that you do. I mean, this has been an outstanding discussion. It's been Thank you for sharing your insight. It's been very helpful, I think, to the community members out there and the professionals who are listening today and who have joined us. I want to also thank the NGC staff. Mina Harris is our director of NGC, and Sterling Stremmel, to Sean Baldwin, to Henry Kahn. I don't know if Carol Gordon and Darian Appleton are on this call as well, and to OJJDP for really sponsoring these webinars. So we can't say thank you enough to them as well. I took a lot away from the discussion we had. You all mentioned teamwork, right? Buy-in, evidence-based programs, respect and appreciation, that people are valued on these teams. And to me, that is really shines through whenever, we meet, but just in discussions all around. And it's very evident from the conversations and how you talk about it, that the work is very meaningful to you and you're very committed to it. And I think that speaks volumes, more so than any presentation, seeing the people that are actually on the ground. And I think you're all in the trenches, really, so to speak, whether you're meeting them face to face or maybe meeting them virtually during this time, right? We're all working together to make our community safer and to impact youth that live in communities that experience a lot of violence, right? Both as victims and as, as a result of them being victims, and also that they're committing violence. So, my hat's off to all of you for the work that you do. And thank you. I'm going to turn it over to Sterling now, and she's going to talk about this online evaluation, I think, right, Sterling?
Yes, thank you all again for joining. I think that was a great discussion. If you have any questions that were not addressed today, or if you're in need of any additional resources, you can reach out to the National Gang Center at our email information@nationalgangcenter.gov or through our website, nationalgangcenter.ojp.gov. As a reminder, there are going to be additional webinars in this community violence intervention series. You can also view our previous webinars on our YouTube channel. And as a reminder, we will notify everyone who registered via email when registration is open for the next series. We will also be providing all of you with a copy of the webinar slides, as well as access to this recording once it is finalized. So at this time, we would ask that everyone take a couple minutes to complete the survey that is coming up on your screen. It'll also be placed in the chat. What you can do is, once you take this survey, there's an option at the end where you can request a certificate of attendance. We will get those out to all of you after the event today. As a reminder, the survey is completely anonymous and provides incredibly valuable information to guide our work. So we're going to leave that link and QR code up for a few minutes so that everyone can take the time to complete that. We'd like to thank you all again for joining, and thank you all to our panelists who provided such a rich discussion. But that will conclude the webinar for today. I hope you all have a great afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. See you all.
Bye.